I just want to start by saying in this video that if you like Silverwolf, then you should go pull for her, right? It shouldn't matter like the meta at all, because in reality the meta really doesn't matter, and that any character you want will work if it's good enough. But this video will be talking about how effective will she be from a meta and objective standpoint. And I also want to add on that the POV I'll be approaching this would be with a free-to-play account or a low spender at best, because most people are in that general area. And I'm not gonna have any numbers here. It only tells me the abilities, so I can't really tell you how effective it is from a numbers perspective, but in a more fundamental perspective. Silverwolf is a quantum-based Nihility character, and her main gimmick is that her skill can inflict weaknesses based on your ally's element. Right? So let's say you have 2 quantum and 2 fire characters, and you try to put an element on an enemy. I'm gonna assume that it'll be a 50-50 between those two, and if they already have a quantum weakness, it'll be 100% of adding fire, and it'll just not add quantum because it's already weak to quantum. In theory, this ability sounds really broken because that means that you can add a element to an enemy that isn't already weak before, meaning that you can probably run mono teams and run DPS where they normally wouldn't work. And this can also extend to the idea that this is also broken because the fact that you can literally run a character where they normally you couldn't run them, like I said, so that means that you wouldn't have to pull for a different DPS of a different element. Except this is kind of the opposite, right? Instead of not having to pull for characters, you kind of have to pull for characters, because now you have to pull certain characters of certain elements of certain roles to make use of this ability. And I think that's the hard part about this character, right? She isn't really very much free to play friendly as much as people think she is. And it also doesn't help that she's released really early, so the best team comps for her right now aren't really that good. Like, if I think about it, the best team comp for her, a mono team, meaning her and three characters are of the same element, it's gonna be definitely Clara, Sashang, and Natasha. That's the only one I can think of. Some people are saying Gepard, Pella, and Yanqing, and I don't really think this is good because Pella and Yanqing really doesn't have that much of I guess synergy. Like, Yanqing benefits from a buffer way more. Another one could possibly be Jingwan, Bailu, and Tingyun, which that is pretty good, except nobody has Bailu, right? And that requires 2 5-stars like the other team comps I mentioned before. That isn't the physical one. And so I think the problem is that her team comps are just way too expensive right now and not too readily available. I think when you give her a rerun in the future, she'll have so much more value, and that she'll be definitely a better character because of just how many more characters will work with her. Although I will say that this does make her very future-proof as a character in theory, because she really cannot get any worse. She can only get better, meaning the more characters they are, the better she is. But there's also that caveat of saying that, like, once you get pretty far into the game, you're most likely to have different kind of DPS and shield breakers built for different elements. So there is that little caveat, right? So it's kind of 50-50, but it is undeniable that she will be better over time. A better way to build a team comp with her ability is, I think, running a dual element team, not a mono element team. So an example would be that if you're going in a silver main guard, right, who's already weak to physical and ice and quantum, I think. So you can run Silverwolf, right, and Natasha. So you have 2 pretty good shield breakers already. Natasha, not so much, right? And then you can run, an example would be you run Bronya if you have Bronya or Sampo, and you abuse putting the fact that you always put the win weakness on him, the silver main captain, and then you can literally just spam E with Sampo. If you have E4 Sampo, then Sampo becomes kind of a DPS, like he does way more damage, right? Another example would be that I have Hook and Asta built on one of my accounts, so that means that I can literally just put the fire weakness, spam Hook, and spam Asta E, because Asta E breaks shield, right? And I think her best role would be kind of a adding an element to an enemy and kind of abusing shield break and doing tons of damage with that, right? Her ultimate is a single target defense shred, and I'm gonna assume that it'll have a better defense shred than Pella, which Pella already does 30% with her ult. And I'm also gonna assume that it's gonna do more damage because Pella is does it in a group, but her is single target. So it'll make her somewhat of a sub DPS like how Welt is, which does give her more value. Her talent is that every time she attacks, she has a chance to put a debuff on you, which could be attack, defense, or speed. In reality, you would want speed every time because you want more turns, but I think it's a little bit hard to really see how well this ability will work in the future because we just don't have the numbers. But I think in general, this will be a pretty good ability because it's every time she attacks, right? So, and she'll be using E, ult, and auto attack every single time because you want her to build skill points, and she's pretty skill point efficient from what I'm gonna assume. One of the best things about 1.1 is that you get a perfect light cone for her, which is right here. And the light cone ability is that it increases the wearer's effect hit rate by 20%. When the wearer attacks enemies that have reduced defense, it gives you 4 energy. So the 4 energy is pretty good, but I think the hit rate is the most important part, obviously. And I'm gonna assume that you can get this to level 5. And if you get this to level 5, I'm gonna assume that this will be 40%. And why is this so important is that so enemies over that of a higher level have a higher chance of resisting debuffs. And so all Nihility characters need to build inherent effective hit rate to make them more consistent in harder content. And this gives you what you need, right? Especially for Serval Wolf, because he already has a problem of that all of her abilities hit once. Meaning that she only gets that one chance to put the debuff or whatever she needs to do. An example is that Sampo, his E hits 5 times, right? Or 4 times if you don't have E1. And it's a 65% chance. Even though it's a pretty low chance, and I think it's base chance, so you can't make it any higher, it's really good because the fact that you can literally spam E and it will most likely hit 3 or 4 times, right? On only one turn. If it only hit one time, he'll be such a worse character because he'd be just inherently less consistent. And so Silver Wolf can avoid this problem by having this light cone, which I assume will give you 50%, and she's probably gonna need a quantum body piece to have effective hit rate, which will give her another 40%. So altogether, she gets 80% from 2 items. And I think that's really, really good because it will make her very easily consistent for free-to-play players. Because then that means that you won't have to hunt for the substat of effective hit rate. Because it's pretty hard to get. To conclude, I'm probably going to pull her on my free-to-play account because I just think she's a pretty good future-proof character because she's only bound to improve. I believe that she's a good investment to let the DPS work in situations where they wouldn't normally work. And I think that her role as a sub DPS defense shredder is a pretty rare role right now, which only Pella has, and she's just straight up better Pella. And so I'm going to pull for her, right? And I'm pulling other characters probably in the future that will kind of benefit her. Like Fushuan is announced on the Hoyo page, and I'm probably going to pull for her because she's also a quantum tank. And I have QQ built on my secondary account, and if I pull her on my secondary account, I'll have 3 quantum characters. So I can probably run a mono quantum team sometime in the future. She also benefits from being a quantum character, which means that she's going to use the quantum relic set. The quantum relic set is the best relic set right now. It's really, really broken. It gives you 10% defense shred if you get a 4 piece, and if they're weak to quantum, you'll get 40% defense shred, which is crazy, right? And so I think it'll make her a pretty good sub DPS, like I mentioned earlier, but I think the quantum just adds a little bit more to that. And I just want to finish the video by saying that if you like her though, go pull for her. Don't let me stop you from all the negatives and positives I said in this video. Determine if you want to pull for her or not. And with that, take care.